The stars above the Sabbat worlds no longer burned as they once had. They were dim now, like the eyes of an old warrior who had seen too many winters, their fire reduced to embers, their light a memory. Entire constellations hung in the black void like dying coals in a hearth gone cold. The great suns of Belhart and Voltimont had begun to fade centuries ago, their brilliance withering under the touch of the warp. Every flicker, every pulse of their failing light was a reminder that the galaxy's age of glory had long passed, and what now remained was a slow, grinding war of attrition against the dark. Below these waning lights, the Sabbat world's crusade moved like a great steel tide. Dozens of fleets, countless regiments, and all the will of the Imperium drawn into a single, terrible spearhead. Yet in the heart of its commander, there was no certainty, no triumph, only the weight of 1,000 choices yet to be made, each with the potential to damn not only the crusade, but the souls of the men and women who served it. And you, yes you, before we speak further of blood and steel, I want you to know something. We care for you, truly and deeply. In this grim galaxy, amidst the shadows of war and the ache of eternity, it is too easy to forget the light. But you are not forgotten. You matter here. Before we begin the tale, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now take a moment. Pour yourself a coffee, feel its warmth in your hands, and let us walk together into the heart of this war. The year was 755, M41. Commander War Master Slado stood upon the observation deck of the Lord High Vaughan, his flagship, a mountain of adamantium and gunmetal drifting in orbit above the reclaimed world of Amistel. From here, the planet looked like a bruise on the skin of the void, storm-racked oceans and dark continents still bearing the scars of invasion. Even in victory, the land seemed wounded, suspicious of its liberators. Slado's armor was ceremonial today, its plate etched with the laurels of campaigns past, the white cloak of his office draped over broad shoulders. It was not the armor of a man expecting battle, but neither was it the garb of one expecting rest. His eyes, dark and deeply set, remained fixed on the planet below, though his thoughts were far away. Reports from Balhout, my lord, came the voice of Colonel Harven, one of his adjutants. The enemy is fortifying their southern hives. Resistance cells are. Slado raised a hand, silencing him. The War Master was not a man to waste words, nor did he enjoy having his moments of contemplation interrupted. The pause was not disrespect, it was calculation. When Slado finally spoke, it was with the voice of a man measuring each syllable like a weapon drawn from its sheath. The enemy expects us to strike Balhout next, he said quietly, and so we shall not. We will take them where their confidence is greatest. We will burn away the lie of their inevitability. Harven hesitated. That will delay our timetable, my lord. The High Lords are not here, Slado said, his gaze hardening. Their maps do not bleed. Ours do. That was the first truth of the crusade. For all the pomp and ceremony, for all the proclamations of terror, the war was fought here, in the cold corridors of starships and the choking air of trench lines. And it was here that Slado carried the heaviest burden, knowing that every decision would be measured not in lines on a map, but in lives extinguished. He turned from the viewport, his cloak whispering against the deck. "Summon General Makaroth," he ordered. "We will require his fleet on the next push." At the mention of Makaroth's name, Harven's expression shifted, only slightly, but enough for Slado to note it. The younger general was a rising star, a man of speed and daring, whose victories had drawn whispers of succession in the mess halls and strategy rooms. Slado had chosen him as second for his brilliance, but brilliance was a dangerous flame. It burned as easily as it illuminated. The meeting took place in the Strategium, a vast chamber where hololithic maps floated like ghosts above the polished brass floor. The air smelled faintly of ozone from the projectors, and the murmurs of aides and tacticians filled the space like the distant sound of surf. Makaroth arrived swiftly, his presence cutting through the room like the prow of a ship through water. His armor was plain compared to Slado's, but it bore the dents and scratches of recent battle. His eyes held the restless fire of a man who found peace only in motion. "You have a plan," Makaroth said, skipping formalities. "I do," Slado replied, gesturing to the map. "Not Balhart. We strike at Voltamund. Its shrines are worth more than its hives, both to us and to the enemy. We will take it before the Archon can dig his claws deeper." Makaroth studied the display. A bold move. Risky. "All moves worth making are," Slado said. The two men stood in silence, each calculating the other as much as the campaign ahead. Between them lay not only the fate of the Crusade, but the unspoken question of its future leadership. Slado knew that should he fall, the Imperium would turn to Makaroth. The thought did not comfort him. Later, alone in his private quarters, Slado sat before a sealed data slate upon his desk. It bore the sigil of terror, an eagle crowned in gold, its wings stretched wide. He had received it 2 weeks ago, delivered by astropathic transmission, its encryption unbroken. He had not opened it. The truth was, he feared its contents. Orders, perhaps, to change the Crusade's course. Political interference disguised as strategy, or something worse. A reminder that in the eyes of terror, he was not irreplaceable. His hand hovered over the slate. His reflection in its black screen looked older than he, remembered, the lines around his eyes carved deeper by sleepless nights. A chime sounded. 3 short notes, the signal for an astropathic message of the highest priority. He rose, the slate still unopened, and stepped into the corridor. Somewhere deep within the ship, the Voxnet crackled with the voice of a fleet captain. "Enemy movement detected. Multiple signatures. The Archon is on the move." Slado paused only a moment before striding toward the Strategium once more. The war was cooling, and for now, the contents of the terror message and the shadow of what it might mean would remain in darkness. Yet as he walked, he could not shake the feeling that the true battle was not the one before him, but the one waiting behind a sealed slate in words he dared not yet read. The Strategium was a cathedral of war. Its vaulted ceilings were lined with banners from past campaigns, tattered, some nearly falling apart, yet preserved as sacred relics of imperial victory. The walls themselves seemed to hum faintly, a vibration born from the immense machinery hidden beneath the ship's adamantium skin. In the center, a vast hololithic display projected the shape of the Sabbat worlds, its ghostly blue light casting the faces of officers into pale, unearthly masks. Slado entered without ceremony, the steel doors whispering shut behind him. Officers straightened at his approach, conversations cut short mid-sentence. Above the table, crimson runes flared into existence, enemy fleet signatures newly arrived from the edges of Imperial sensor nets. They were moving fast, too fast for a standard Chaos raiding pattern. This was deliberate. This was the hand of a commander who understood how to wield fear as a weapon. "Report," Slado said, his voice carrying through the chamber. Admiral Van Dor inclined his head. "Long-range augurs have picked up 3 distinct fleet groups, translating from the warp at the edge of the Voltamund system. We believe this is a probing strike, testing the depth of our defenses before the main push. Slader's eyes narrowed. And the main push? Vandor hesitated, his gaze flickering to the flickering crimson glyphs. If this is Nadzibar, then the rest of his fleet is already in motion. At that moment, the side doors opened, and General Makaroth stepped inside. He was still in his battle plate, the gold trim dulled by travel, a faint scorch mark across his left pauldron hinting at a recent engagement. "You called," he said simply. Slado didn't look up from the hololith. "Voltamund is under threat. I will need your fleet to make all speed there. Secure the shrine cities before the enemy can defile them." Makaroth's gaze moved over the map, and a faint smile ghosted across his lips. "So we do take Voltamund after all." "This is not a moment for pride," Slader replied sharply. Makaroth didn't flinch. "It's not pride. It's recognition. You know as well as I do that taking Voltamund forces Nadzibar to commit his strength. He can't afford to let it fall uncontested." Slader turned to face him fully. "It also forces us to commit ours. Every ship, every regiment we pour into Voltamund leaves another flank exposed. Nadzibar knows this, and he will bleed us for it." There was a silence between them, long enough for the weight of their history to make itself felt. Makaroth's rise through the ranks had been meteoric, fueled by victories as daring as they were costly. Slado had seen his potential, but also his recklessness. "Give me the order," Makaroth said quietly, "and I will take Voltamund before the week is out." Slado studied him. The man radiated certainty, the kind that could inspire armies or ruin them. "You will have the order," he said at last, "but not before you understand this. Voltamund must be taken intact. The shrines, the reliquaries, the vaults, they are the Emperor's inheritance in this sector. We are not merely fighting for ground. We are fighting for the soul of the Sabbat worlds." Makaroth inclined his head in acknowledgement, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed the truth. His concern was victory, not preservation. When the meeting adjourned, Slado lingered alone at the hololith. The enemy runes pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. His hand went unconsciously to the data slate in his pocket, the one he still hadn't opened. It felt heavier now, as though its contents had gained weight with every passing hour. Hours later, the Lord Highvorn's main hangar was alive with activity. Servitors clanked along the decks, loading supply pallets into the bellies of troop carriers. Imperial guardsmen marched in tight columns, their laser guns slung, their eyes forward. The air smelled of machine oil and ozone, and the distant thrum of the ship's reactor reverberated through every bulkhead. Slado moved through the chaos like a shadow, accompanied by a pair of stormtrooper escorts. He preferred to see his soldiers before they departed. There was a truth in their faces that no report could convey. Some were sharp with anticipation, others pale with fear. Many bore the hollow, glassy-eyed look of those who had survived too much already. He stopped before a regiment kneeling in prayer. A Ministorum priest moved among them, sprinkling holy water across helmets and murmuring benedictions. The sight stirred something deep within him. He had been a soldier long before he had been a commander, and he knew what it was to take comfort in ritual before the unknown. "May the Emperor guide your aim," Slado said quietly as he passed, and a dozen voices murmured, "And yours, my lord," in reply. In the upper gantries, Makaroth supervised the final loading of his flagship's detachment. Their eyes met across the hangar, and for a heartbeat, neither looked away. Then Makaroth gave a short nod and turned back to his men. That night, in the quiet of his quarters, Salado finally broke the seal on the terror slate. The message was brief, written in the cold, formal cadence of High Gothic. It commended his victories, urged continued progress, and contained a single line that struck him harder than any weapon. Preparations for succession must be undertaken in accordance with contingency protocol succession. The word echoed in his mind. It was not a command to stand down, but it was a shadow cast across his authority. It meant that somewhere, in the hidden chambers of terror, his replacement was already being considered. Perhaps they had already chosen him. Perhaps they had chosen Makaroth. Salado set the slate down slowly. He understood the truth now. The crusade was no longer solely his to command. It was a prize, and others would claim it when the moment was right. The next day, Voltamund burned. Reports came in waves, first of enemy landings, then of shrine desecrations, then of pitched battles in the streets of the capital. Makaroth's fleet arrived in system, guns blazing, but the enemy was already entrenched. The fighting was brutal, the kind that left cities in ruins and saints' bones buried beneath rubble. From the bridge of the Lord High Vaughan, Salado watched the tactical feed. Green icons for Imperial forces blinked and vanished, replaced by the jagged red of Chaos positions. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Every loss, every regiment destroyed, was a ledger entry in the debt he would never repay. And yet, beneath the rage, there was something colder. A calculation, unbidden, of how these losses might weaken him in the eyes of terror, and how they might strengthen Makaroth. He forced the thought away. Such thinking was poison. Still, in the dark between stars, poison had a way of finding its way into the blood. The fires of Voltamund's shrines were still smouldering when the first rumours began to spread, not across official Vox channels or command briefs, but in the whispered shadows of the Imperial ranks. The soldiers spoke of ghosts moving through the ruins, of prayers turned to curses, and of a strange commander who fought with the discipline of a loyalist, yet carried the wrath of a traitor. Commander Salado had grown familiar with such tales. War bred superstition as easily as it bred death. Yet these whispers gnawed at him like a hidden blade, sharper than any bolt around. In the wake of Voltamund's fall, the cost was clear. Entire regiments had been lost to fierce counterattacks, and the city's sacred temples were desecrated, their relics shattered or stolen. The Archon Nadzibar's forces had struck with a precision that betrayed intimate knowledge of Imperial tactics, and with a brutality that defied mercy. Salado sat in the war chamber aboard the Lord High Vaughan, surrounded by holomaps flickering with red markers of losses and zones of enemy control. His face was a mask of calm, but inside the war raged fiercer than ever. Reports from the survivors, said Colonel Harvin, speak of a figure, an enemy commander who bears the sigils of the Imperial Guard. His strategies mirror ours too closely. Many believe he was one of us, once Slado's jaw tightened. And yet, he fights for the enemy. Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from within, Harvin murmured. That night, Salado found himself alone on the observation deck, gazing out at the swirling clouds of Voltamund's ruined skies. The weight of command pressed upon him, heavier than the armour that clung to his body. In the silence, he allowed himself the forbidden thought. What if this traitor had once been his friend? Elsewhere, General Makaroth's confidence only deepened. His swift victories on the battlefield had earned him praise and whispered rumors of ambition. Yet beneath his steel resolve, the lines between loyalty and self-interest began to blur. During a private meeting, Makaroth told Slado, "Victory requires sacrifices, my lord. Not just of men, but of old loyalties and soft sentiments." Slado met his gaze, unflinching. "And when do sacrifices become betrayals?" Makaroth smiled faintly, a shadow crossing his features. "When they serve the greater good." But in the theatre of war, good and evil were seldom clear. As the crusade pressed onward, Slado wrestled with his own doubts. The message from Terra, the sealed slate, remained unopened on his desk, a spectre of possible doom. Each day it beckoned him with the promise of truth, yet he feared what that truth might cost. His isolation deepened. Trusted advisors whispered behind closed doors. Allies grew distant, and through it all the shadow of the traitor loomed, a spectre not just of the enemy, but of himself. The Sabbat worlds had become a crucible of war and treachery, where every victory was tainted by loss, and every loyalty tested by doubt. Slado knew this was only the beginning. The distant thunder of artillery rolled across the scarred plains of Balhaut, echoing through the storm-churned skies like the growl of an ancient beast disturbed. Lightning forked across the clouds, illuminating jagged spires of ruined cities that clawed toward the heavens, their broken silhouettes casting long shadows over fields soaked in ash and blood. Within the command center of the Lord High Vaughn, Commander Slado studied the hololithic displays, his gaze steady but distant. The battle for Balhaut was underway, brutal and unrelenting, a contest not just of weapons and numbers, but of wills. Beside him, General Makaroth paced with restless energy, his armor bearing fresh scars from the skirmishes below. The younger man's fervor was palpable, his voice sharp with impatience, as he addressed the assembled officers. "We cannot wait for the enemy to dictate the terms," Makaroth declared, slamming a gauntleted fist onto the table. "Strike hard, strike fast. The faster we break their lines, the fewer lives we lose." Slader's eyes narrowed. "War is not a game of speed alone, General. Each assault must be measured. Haste breeds mistakes, and mistakes are paid for in blood." Makaroth met Slado's gaze, unbowed. "We have bled enough already. The men grow weary. The fleet's supplies run thin. If we delay, the enemy will only grow stronger." A flicker of doubt passed through Slado's mind. Makaroth's ambition was no secret, and yet there was truth in his urgency. The longer the siege dragged on, the more the spirit of the crusade waned. "Your strategy risks everything," Slado said slowly. "But I will trust your command, for now." The tension between them was unspoken but thick, a taut wire stretched between experience and ambition. Both men bore the weight of a galaxy's hopes and fears on their shoulders, yet their visions for victory diverged sharply. As the battle raged below, the streets of Balhaut's hive cities became rivers of fire and ash. Imperial Guard regiments fought house to house, their laser guns and flamers carving a path through enemy snipers and warp-tainted horrors. The enemy fought with the desperation of the damned, their voices echoing in darkened alleys, curses to forgotten gods, promises of vengeance, and whispers of betrayal from within. Slado received reports of a sudden collapse on the Eastern Front, a failure of coordination that allowed enemy forces to break through Imperial lines. Panic rippled through the ranks. On the bridge, Slado clenched his fists, the familiar surge of command mixed with a cold dread. Was this a failure of his generals, or something darker? General Makaroth approached, his face grim but resolute. "An ambush, my lord," he reported. "A trap laid by forces that knew our plans. Someone betrayed us." The word struck Slater like a hammer blow. The notion that traitors walked among their own shattered the fragile trust that bound the Crusade together. He turned toward the hololithic map, eyes scanning for signs of sabotage. "We must root out this treachery before it spreads," Slater said, voice low but commanding. "Send agents to investigate every officer, every advisor. No one is beyond suspicion." Later, in the dim glow of his quarters, Slater pored over reports of the battle's casualties and the beginnings of the investigations. The corridors of the Lord High Vaughan felt colder than ever, shadows lengthening like the doubts growing in his heart. A knock came at the door. Colonel Harvin entered, his face lined with fatigue. "Commander, the Inquisition has requested access to the Crusade's records," Harvin said quietly. "They claim the traitor's hand may extend deeper than we imagined." Slater nodded, his mind racing. The Inquisition's presence was both a blessing and a curse, a necessary force against corruption, but also a reminder that trust was a luxury long lost. "Allow them access," Slater said, "but keep the fleet informed only as necessary. We cannot afford panic." Harvin hesitated. "There are whispers, my lord, that General Makaroth himself has been acting in ways that raise questions." Slater's eyes darkened. The man he had trusted, whose fire had driven the Crusade forward, now shadowed by suspicion. "We will watch him closely," Slater replied, voice heavy, "for the sake of the Crusade and for ourselves." As dawn broke over the war-torn world, Slater stood once more at the observation deck, the battered globe of Balhaut turning slowly beneath the rising sun. The fires of war still burned, but in the distance, storm clouds gathered, ominous and unyielding. In that moment, Slater felt the cruel truth of the Crusade pressing down. Victories were won only to be measured against the losses they entailed, and every ally could become a foe. The empire they sought to build seemed less like a fortress and more like a fragile glass tower, trembling on the edge of collapse. And at its heart stood a man torn between duty, doubt, and the slow poison of betrayal. The cold, unyielding walls of the Lord High Vaughan seemed to close in around Commander Slater as he stood alone in the dimly lit chamber known as the Crucible Room. It was here, beneath layers of adamantium and ceramite, that the War Council had met in secret, far from prying eyes and the incessant hum of the strategium above. The Crucible Room bore its name not for ceremony, but for the relentless pressure that forged decisions inside it, decisions that could birth salvation or ruin. Slado's reflection shimmered faintly in the polished black surface of a tactical holoscreen, but his mind was far away, caught in the labyrinth of doubts and suspicions gnawing at his soul. The Crusade was unraveling, not merely on the battlefields of Balhaut or Voltimand, but within the very ranks sworn to uphold it. A soft hiss marked the arrival of Colonel Harvin. The adjutant's face was drawn, lines deeper than before. "My lord, we have intercepted encrypted transmissions. Their origin is disturbing." Slater turned, eyes heavy but alert. "Speak plainly." Harvin's voice dropped, edged with grim certainty. "The transmissions appear to come from within our own fleet, encrypted messages sent to the Archon Nadzibar's command." Slater's heart tightened. The stain of treason was no longer rumor. It was fact. "Have we identified the sender?" Slater asked. Harvin hesitated. "There are several suspects, but the one that stands out is General Makaroth." The name fell like a stone in the silent chamber. Slado's fingers clenched into fists, nails biting into his palms. Makaroth, he whispered. My own second. And yet, he has led us into the jaws of ruin. Harvan nodded. His recent campaigns have yielded victories, yes, but at what cost? Losses that strain our strength beyond endurance. It appears he's playing a dangerous game, one that serves the Archon more than the Emperor. Slado's mind raced through every memory, every glance, every command. Was the ambition he once admired now a mask for betrayal? We must act swiftly, Slado said, his voice steel. Summon him. We confront this treachery before it can spread. When Makaroth entered the crucible room, his bearing was unyielding, as if he carried the weight of a legion on his shoulders. His eyes met Slado's, cold and calculating. You wish to see me, Commander? He asked, voice steady but edged with something unreadable. Slado's gaze bore into him. Encrypted transmissions have been intercepted. Messages sent to the enemy command. You are the prime suspect. Makaroth's expression flickered, just for a moment. Then a shadow of a smile curled at his lips. Commander, he said, this crusade is a crucible that will burn away weakness and doubt. If I have made choices you cannot understand, then perhaps your vision is too narrow. Slado's voice hardened. This is not about vision. This is treason. Makaroth stepped closer, the tension between them like a drawn blade. And what if I told you that treason is sometimes the only path to victory? That loyalty to the Emperor means sacrifice, even if it means sacrifice of comrades. The room seemed to pulse with the weight of his words, and Slado understood that the battle for the Crusade was no longer just against an external enemy. It was a war of ideologies, of fractured loyalties. You leave me no choice, Slado said. I relieve you of command, pending an inquiry. Makaroth's eyes gleamed. You will regret this. As Makaroth turned and strode from the room, Slado felt a cold shadow settle over his heart. The path ahead would be darker than any battlefield. In the days that followed, the crusade fractured further. Whispers of dissent and suspicion spread like a contagion, infecting trust with poison. Officers once steadfast now questioned their orders. Soldiers looked to commanders with wary eyes. The Inquisition's agents moved silently through the fleet, their presence a reminder that no one was above scrutiny. Slado himself found solace only in fleeting moments, alone in the observatory, staring into the abyss where stars faded and wars were won and lost. Amid the chaos, a single truth remained. The crusade was both the sword and the shackle of those who dared to wield it. The stars outside the Lord High Vaughan pulsed faintly through the viewport, like distant echoes of a light long extinguished. Inside the chamber, Commander Slado sat hunched over his desk, the weight of the Crusade's fate pressing down on his shoulders like the crushing silence of the void. It had been weeks since Makaroth's removal, a gesture meant to stabilize, to quell the growing unrest. But instead the cracks widened. The officers whispered in hushed tones, rumors of factionalism and conspiracy spreading like warp-tainted wildfire. The loyalty of even the closest aides now seemed suspect. A soft knock interrupted the oppressive quiet. Colonel Harvan entered, carrying a sealed data slate etched with the Imperial Eagle. Slado recognized the look in Harvan's eyes. News both urgent and grievous. My lord, Harvan said quietly, the Inquisition's investigation has concluded. The evidence against Makaroth was circumstantial. The transmissions, they were forged. Slado's eyes lifted, disbelief and relief warring in their depths. But, Harvin continued, there is a darker truth. The true traitor moves unseen among us, one who understands how to manipulate shadows and forge false trails. The room seemed to close in tighter. Slado's breath was slow, deliberate. The weight of betrayal had not lifted, merely shifted. Who? He demanded. Harvin hesitated, then lowered his voice to a whisper. The Archon Nadzibar's agents have infiltrated not only the battlefield, but the very heart of our command. Slado's mind reeled. The enemy was no longer just across the stars. It was within their very walls. That night, Slado summoned his closest confidants to the Crucible room. The council was tense, faces etched with worry. We are fighting a war on two fronts, Slado began, voice steady but grim. The enemy without and the enemy within. We cannot trust even the shadows. A murmured agreement circled the room. One officer, Captain Lorne, spoke up. My lord, if the traitor walks among us, how do we root them out without tearing ourselves apart? Slader's eyes locked on Lorne. With vigilance, with faith in the Emperor, and with sacrifice. Days later, a sudden assault erupted on the communication arrays of the Lord High Vaughn. Sabotage, expertly executed, severed links with several battle groups. Panic threatened to engulf the fleet. Slado's voice, cold and commanding, cut through the chaos. Restore comms at all costs. The Crusade cannot survive in silence. Amid the repairs, Slado found himself alone once more on the observation deck, the stars now distant and cold. His thoughts drifted to the message from Terra, still unopened, still a looming shadow. The burden of command was isolation, the loneliness of knowing every choice could mean salvation or annihilation. As the Sabbat worlds burned and bled, the slow erosion of trust threatened to consume the Crusade from within. Slado's resolve hardened. He would bear the weight of this war, its betrayals, its sacrifices, and its cost, for the Emperor, for the future of mankind. The void was alive with fire and fury. Fleets clashed amid swirling. Tempest storms birthed from the warp. A chaotic sea that threatened to swallow even the strongest vessels whole. The Lord High Vaughn moved like a leviathan through the cosmic maelstrom. Its hull scarred and battered, its crew weary but unbroken. Commander Slado stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the strategic hololith that flickered with battle reports. Each marker a story of valor or despair. The Crusade's forces pushed deeper into the Sabbat worlds, but with every system claimed, new shadows stretched behind them, whispering of unseen enemies and ancient curses. General Makaroth's name still lingered like a ghost in the corridors. Though officially removed, his influence had not vanished. Factions loyal to him whispered in secret, their loyalty a tinderbox ready to ignite. Slado knew that to crush this growing dissent, he must face not just the external threat, but the fractures within his own command. In the war-torn city of Vashan, Imperial infantry slogged through rubble-strewn streets under relentless fire. The enemy was cunning, striking with the precision of vipers and retreating before reprisals could be mounted. Reports came in of enemy psychers bending the minds of soldiers, turning brother against brother. Slado received a report that chilled him deeper than any cold blast from the void. An assassination attempt had been made on one of his closest advisors, Captain Lorne. The strike was almost successful, only foiled by the quick reflexes of loyal guards. This war is no longer just fought with bolters and blades, Slado told his officers grimly. It is fought in shadows and silence. On the bridge, the strategic focus shifted. New enemy fleets had been detected emerging from warp rifts, larger, more organized, and seemingly intent on crushing the Crusade in a decisive blow. Admiral Van Dor, deploy all available firepower. We cannot allow them to break our lines, Slater ordered. The Admiral nodded grimly. Aye, Commander. The fleet will hold. As the fleets converged, the sky burned with 1,000 firestorms. Laser beams lanced through darkness, and torpedoes screamed in deadly arcs. The space around the Sabbat worlds became a crucible, a cosmic forge where empires were forged or shattered. Yet even amid this chaos, Slado's mind was haunted by the internal war. He had learned from the Inquisition's probes that Makaroth's faction was not merely disloyal, but dangerous. Their machinations threatened to unravel everything. In a secret meeting with Inquisitor Sariel, Slado discussed the stakes. The traitors seek to turn this crusade into a blood-soaked throne game, Sariel said, voice like cold steel. They will sacrifice worlds and men to seize power. Slado nodded, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him. We must act, he said quietly, before the crusade devours itself. The battle raged both outside and within. Slado's thoughts returned often to the unopened slate from Terra. What secrets did it hold? What destinies had already been written without his knowledge? The stars beyond the viewport blinked coldly, indifferent to the struggles of men. And yet, in the heart of the storm, hope flickered, a fragile flame against the encroaching darkness. The war's relentless tide battered the Sabbat worlds with no mercy. Beneath shattered skies and crumbled spires, the people clung to faith and fire, while armies clashed in streets soaked with ash and blood. The Lord High Vorn loomed above the shattered planet of Vashan, a silent sentinel bearing the scars of countless battles. Commander Slater's eyes were heavy with fatigue, the weight of command pressing deeper each day. His hands trembled briefly as he received a communique from the field. A critical supply convoy had been ambushed and decimated near the city's outer ring. The loss was catastrophic. Food, munitions, and medical supplies swallowed by shadow. He turned to Colonel Harvin. How secure are the supply lines? Harvin's face was grim. They're deteriorating, my lord. The enemy knows our routes well, and the traitor's influence grows. We cannot trust our own. Slater's gaze darkened. The bitter taste of betrayal had become a poison, infecting every decision, every alliance. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the ranks, rumors of secret meetings, of shadowed figures plotting not for victory, but for power. The Archon Nadzibar's agents moved with unsettling ease, infiltrating imperial bastions. Slado convened a clandestine meeting with the Inquisitor Sariel, her presence a stark reminder that even the Emperor's light had shadows. The traitor's hand touches deeper than we imagined, Sariel said, voice low and unwavering. We must purge this corruption before it consumes us all. Slado nodded, feeling the fragile thread of hope fray further. In the heart of the Lord High Vorn, Captain Lorne stood guard outside the interrogation chamber. Inside, prisoners, once trusted officers, were questioned and broken by the relentless mind probes of the Inquisition. The lines between loyalty and treason blurred as secrets spilled, revealing alliances forged in desperation and betrayal. Lorne's thoughts drifted to Slado. The commander's isolation was complete, burdened by choices no man should bear alone. Amidst the chaos, a single transmission cut through the static, a coded message from a hidden faction loyal to Makaroth. Their plan was ruthless, to seize control of the crusade by any means necessary, even if it meant the death of countless innocents. Slado's blood ran cold as he realized the war was no longer a matter of soldiers and planets, but a contest for the soul of the Imperium itself. In a private chamber, Slado opened the long-sealed data slate from Terra. The message was brief but chilling, a command to prepare for contingency plans, a veiled warning that the Emperor's patience was waning. The fate of the crusade rested on a knife's edge, balanced between loyalty and ambition, salvation and ruin. The shadow of betrayal stretched long across the bloodied battlefields of the Sabbat worlds. Each victory carried the bitter aftertaste of loss, and each defeat sowed seeds of doubt deep within the hearts of men. Commander Slado's once unshakable resolve now wavered beneath the weight of unseen enemies and fractured loyalties. The Lord High Vaughn drifted through the void like a wounded beast, its systems strained and its crew restless. Below decks, whispers of treachery had grown into roars. Factions loyal to General Makaroth stirred unrest, their secretive plots weaving like threads in a deadly tapestry. In the War Council chamber, Slado faced his officers, their faces masks of grim determination and concealed fear. "We stand on the brink of ruin," Slado declared, voice heavy but steady. "The traitors within threaten to undo all we have fought for. We must root them out, whatever the cost." Colonel Harvin stepped forward, his voice measured. "The Inquisition's reach extends deep, but the enemy adapts. We must be vigilant, and we must trust no one." A murmur of agreement passed through the room, but Slado saw the flicker of doubt in many eyes. Outside the war room, Captain Lorne prepared to lead a covert strike against suspected traitor cells entrenched within the fleet. The mission was perilous, veiled in secrecy and uncertainty. Lorne's mind lingered on Slado, his commander burdened by choices that none could fully understand. "The crusade will not fall," Lorne vowed silently. "Not while I breathe." As the strike force moved through the dim corridors of the Lord High Vaughn, shadows lengthened and dangers multiplied. Enemy saboteurs lurked unseen, their attacks sudden and brutal. Every step forward was paid for in blood. In the midst of battle, Lorne confronted a familiar face, an officer once trusted, now revealed as a spy. The confrontation was swift and merciless. "You betrayed us all," Lorne spat, voice thick with sorrow and rage. The traitor smiled coldly. "I did what was necessary. The crusade is already lost." Meanwhile, Slado wrestled with his own ghosts. The unopened data slate from Terra haunted his thoughts, a silent judge waiting for revelation. In a moment of rare vulnerability, he confided to Colonel Harvin, "Is this war truly for the Emperor's glory, or for the ambitions of men?" Harvin's reply was grim. "Sometimes the line is all but erased." The stars beyond the viewport flickered coldly, indifferent to the struggles of mortals. And yet, amidst the ruin and despair, the faint pulse of hope remained, fragile but unyielding. The war was far from over. The Lord High Vaughn trembled beneath the fury of relentless bombardment. Outside its battered hull, enemy cruisers streaked like vengeful comets, seeking to rend the Crusade's flagship from the void. Inside, the War Council convened amid alarms and flashing warnings, the air thick with the stench of ozone and desperation. Commander Slado stood resolute, his face a mask carved from iron and sorrow. Around him, officers moved with frantic purpose, their voices a storm of orders and reports. The enemy's assault was the fiercest yet, a storm that threatened to break the Crusade's fragile grip on the Sabbat worlds. The enemy fleet has breached our outer defences. Admiral Van Dor's voice rang out. Shields are failing on decks 12 and 14. If they board the Vaughn, we will lose everything. Slado's eyes narrowed. Prepare boarding countermeasures. Deploy Void Marines to critical points. This ship will not fall today. Amid the chaos, a sharp ping resonated through the comlink, a coded transmission from an unknown source. Slado recognized the signature immediately. Inquisitor Serial. Commander, her voice cut through the noise. New intelligence confirms the presence of a sleeper agent within our inner command. They have access to critical strategic data. Slado's heart sank deeper. The betrayal was closer than ever. Can we identify the agent? He demanded. Sariel hesitated. Not yet. But we have reason to believe they will act imminently. As alarms blared and the battle raged, Slado felt the crushing weight of the Crusade's fate pressing in. Outside, the void was aflame. Inside, trust fractured like shattered ceramite. He found a moment's respite in a private chamber, where the sealed data slate from Terra awaited his attention. Hands trembling, he activated the device, and the image of an austere figure, an envoy of the Emperor, appeared. The message was brief, cold, and uncompromising. The Sabbat world's crusade has strayed from its path. Command shall be restructured. A new overseer will arrive. Prepare for reckoning. Slader's soul darkened as the words echoed in his mind. The Emperor's patience had worn thin. In the bowels of the ship, Captain Lorne led a desperate counterstrike against boarding parties. The clash was brutal and unforgiving. Steels sang, bolters roared, and the cries of the fallen echoed in the corridors. Lorne's unit fought with grim determination, each victory a small defiance against the crushing tide. Yet even as they repelled the invaders, the spectre of betrayal loomed. A saboteur had disabled vital systems moments before the assault. The battle for the Lord High Vaughn was both external and internal, a crucible of fire that would forge or shatter the fragile hope of the Crusade. Slado stood once more on the bridge, the stars beyond flickering like dying embers. The war was no longer a battle for territory, but a struggle for the soul of the Imperium. And the final reckoning was fast approaching. The halls of the Lord High Vaughn were heavy with the silence of the fallen. The battle had left scars far deeper than those carved into the ship's armor. Trust, that fragile thread binding men together, had frayed to tatters. Commander Slado moved through the corridors, each step a measured echo in the vast cathedral of war. His eyes held the weight of 1,000 broken promises. The Crusade was a shadow of its former self, fractured, bleeding, and haunted by ghosts of betrayal. In the War Council chamber, Slado faced his remaining officers. The air was thick with tension, unspoken accusations, and the bitter taste of defeat. "We stand at a crossroads," Slado began, voice low but resolute. "The Emperor's light demands sacrifice. We must purge the rot within if we are to survive." Colonel Harvin stepped forward, his expression grim. "The Inquisition's purge is underway. Loyalists are taking control, but resistance remains fierce." Slado's gaze hardened. "We will be merciless. For the Imperium, there is no room for hesitation." Elsewhere, Captain Lorne led a squad deep into the labyrinthine lower decks, hunting remnants of Makaroth's faction. The corridors echoed with distant gunfire and the cries of the fallen. Lorne paused at a shattered doorway, the signs of a recent skirmish evident. Blood smeared the floor, and a lone datapad flickered weakly. He retrieved the device, scanning encrypted messages that revealed plans of a final devastating coup. A coordinated strike aimed at the heart of the Crusade's command. Back on the bridge, Slater received a distress call. A loyalist battalion was besieged on the moon of Kelsa Prime, cut off and overwhelmed. "We cannot afford to lose Kelsa," Slater said, voice tight with urgency. "Send reinforcements immediately." The crushing weight of command pressed upon him. Every decision was a thread in the tapestry of survival or destruction. That night, Slado stood alone before the shattered viewport, the void beyond a dark abyss. Memories flickered, faces of the fallen, the friends betrayed, the empire slipping through his grasp. He whispered to the emptiness, "For the Emperor, for the Crusade, I will not falter." But in the depths of his heart, a question burned with bitter fire. How many more must die before the shadows are vanquished? The air inside the Lord High Vaughan was thick with the scent of ozone and burnt ceramite, the remnants of countless battles lingering like ghosts. Commander Slater's gaze was fixed on the hololithic map that flickered before him. A fractured mosaic of war zones, supply lines, and shattered alliances. Every blinking light was a reminder of a world torn asunder, a life sacrificed. The Sabbat worlds bled, and so did the Crusade. A sudden alert cut through the stillness. "Commander," Colonel Harvin reported, voice taut with urgency. "The Inquisition has uncovered a covert network, one that links the Archon Nadzibar's agents directly to high-ranking officers within our fleet." Slater's expression darkened. The rot ran deeper than he had feared. "We must root out every last traitor," he said. "No compromise, no hesitation." Harvin nodded grimly. "The purge has begun." In the labyrinthine lower decks, Captain Lorne led a squad of executioners, men and women chosen not just for their skill, but for their unwavering loyalty. They moved silently through the shadows, hunting the vipers within. Each confrontation was a battle not only of weapons but of wills. Friends turned enemies, brothers became foes. The cost was measured in shattered bonds and bloodied hands. Meanwhile, whispers reached Slado of another secret, an ancient weapon hidden deep within the ruins of a lost Sabbat world. A weapon said to possess power beyond mortal comprehension. The possibility of such a force stirred a flicker of hope, but also fear, for power in the wrong hands could doom them all. In a rare moment of solitude, Slater reflected on the cost of the Crusade. Immortality, once a blessing for many commanders and warlords, now seemed a curse. To live through endless cycles of war and betrayal was a torment few could endure. The Emperor's vision for mankind's destiny was grand, but the price was written in blood and sorrow. As the purge raged and the war storm grew fiercer, Slado steeled himself for the inevitable reckoning. The fate of the Sabbat worlds and the soul of the Crusade hung precariously in the balance. The corridors of the Lord High Vaughan were awash with flickering red lights as the emergency protocols blared, a harbinger of chaos not just in the war raging outside, but in the hearts of those within. Commander Slado stood at the epicenter of the storm, his face etched with lines carved by sleepless nights and impossible choices. Tonight, the Crucible Room would bear witness to the final unraveling. The council was assembled, their faces shadowed by tension and dread. Among them, the spectre of betrayal loomed larger than any enemy fleet. Eyes that once held loyalty now flickered with fear or defiance. Makaroth's faction has made their move, Slado began, voice low and steady. They have seized control of the communication arrays and seek to cripple our command. Colonel Harvin's jaw clenched. They intend to sever our links to Terra. Without the Emperor's guidance, we fall into darkness. A heavy silence followed. The weight of such loss was immeasurable. Outside the chamber, Captain Lorne's squad fought fiercely to reclaim the communication deck. Each corridor was a battleground of fire and steel, a symphony of destruction echoing through the ship's veins. Lorne's voice cut through the radio static, commanding with unwavering resolve, "Hold the line. For the Emperor. For the Crusade." Inside the Crucible room, Slado faced the harshest truth. The betrayal was not just political, it was personal. Trusted friends had turned into enemies. Sacrifices had been demanded, and yet the enemy within persisted. "I will not let this crusade die in shadows," Slado vowed, "but I fear the cost will be more than any of us can bear." As the battle for control raged both within the Lord High Vaughn and across the stars, Slader's thoughts drifted to the sealed data slant from Terra. The Emperor's envoy had warned of reckoning, and that moment had arrived. With a heavy heart, Slado prepared to make a choice, one that would decide the fate of the Sabbat worlds and the legacy of the Crusade itself. The crimson glow of the Crucible room cast long shadows across the faces of those gathered. A council fractured by betrayal and bound by desperate hope. Commander Slado stood at the center, his silhouette a dark monolith amid the chaos. Outside, the Lord High Vaughn shuddered as boarding parties clashed and alarms screamed, a cacophony of war that echoed the turmoil within the hearts of men. Slado's voice cut through the tension, calm but resolute. "We stand on the precipice of oblivion. The traitors have struck at the heart of our command, but we will not yield." Colonel Harvin's eyes flashed. "The enemy is cunning, but our loyalty is forged in the Emperor's light." A murmur of agreement rose, fragile as the hope that sustained them. Yet in the shadows, a figure moved unseen, the last agent of the Archon Nadzibar's conspirators. His mission was clear, to deliver a final blow that would shatter the Crusade's fragile unity. As Slader prepared to counter the traitor's advance, the saboteur struck, sabotaging the ship's vital systems. Lights flickered and systems failed, sending the Vaughn into peril. Captain Lorne led the defense, rallying the loyalists with fierce determination. Every corridor became a battlefield, every breath a struggle between survival and despair. Lorne's thoughts turned to Slado, a commander burdened by impossible choices yet unbroken in spirit. "We fight not just for victory," Lorne radioed, "but for the soul of the Imperium." Amid the chaos, Slado received a final transmission from Terra. The Emperor's envoy had arrived. The weight of judgment was palpable. The Crusade's fate was no longer in Slado's hands alone. The reckoning had come. The Lord High Vaughn hung in the void like a dying star, its hull battered and its systems failing. The once mighty flagship of the Sabbat world's crusade was now a tomb drifting among the ashes of shattered hopes and broken loyalties. Commander Slado stood alone on the observation deck, gazing into the endless Black Sea speckled with distant, cold suns. The weight of millennia pressed upon him, an immortal soul trapped in a galaxy of fleeting lives and endless war. Behind him, the ship echoed with the quiet of the fallen. The loyalists had fought fiercely but paid a terrible price. Betrayals had left scars no healing could mend. Allies had become ghosts, their voices whispers on the wind. The Emperor's envoy had come and gone, delivering judgment that could not be ignored. Command was stripped, and the Crusade's remnants were to be folded into new hands. Slado's thoughts drifted to the cost, the endless cycle of sacrifice, the price of immortality. To live beyond time was to watch empires rise and crumble, to bear witness to the futility of mortal ambition. He whispered to the void, "For the Emperor, for those who believed, this was our burden." The dying suns outside mirrored the final flickers of the Crusade's flame. A great empire had fallen, not with a single cataclysmic strike, but through fracture, betrayal, and the slow erosion of hope. Slado turned from the viewport, his figure silhouetted against the cold stars. The end was not a thunderous roar, but a solemn sigh. In the silence, one truth remained. War was eternal, and the price of ambition was paid in blood. The crusade was over, but the galaxy would never forget